welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Silent Hill 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the most sad yet thought-provoking video games I have ever played. I will always remember blankly staring at the credit screen after finishing this game with a certain message being read out and feeling my heart break in real time. Silent Hill, as I said during our Silent Hill 3 retrospective, is art. And as we continue our celebration of Silent Hill between the 3 retrospective, which we played for the first time, please check that out if you missed it, we also have to talk about the real one that we're here for in Silent Hill 2. And we're here for that because of the remake dropping soon. Now, when the remake was announced, I was a bit conflicted. I love Silent Hill 2. However, it's being handled by Bloober Team now, and Bloober Team is full of passionate developers who really love survival horror, and in fact, they've said many times they were very heavily inspired by Silent Hill, but they really haven't hit that mark for me yet in the terms of quality. And in fact, most of their games that they've made, I don't like really at all. But as time has gone on, at first, I feel like my fears were affirmed with how James looked, how the gameplay was kind of looking. It really just wasn't feeling like the remake was being justified, but then criticism came in, and it looks like Bloober Team has responded properly, and we've seen some hands-on previews suggesting that Silent Hill 2 may be the remake we actually always dreamt of. We'll see in due time. We're recording this ahead of any reviews dropping, but the real question people are asking is Silent Hill 2 really that good? Do you have to play Silent Hill 1 or 3 or anything to understand what's going on in Silent Hill 2? Because many people will see Silent Hill 2 and go, why would I jump into the second entry in the game? We're gonna break down just why I think this game is so special. To answer it early, yes, it really is that good, depending on who you ask, because in the original game, there are some gameplay things that we'll get into that naturally carry throughout the entirety of the series, but I think the remake will ameliorate that a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, consider subscribing. So let's talk about Silent Hill 2 when it came out on the PS2. There is also the greatest hits version, which came in with new sub-scenarios and weapons as well, if you're looking for that more original experience. Silent Hill 2 is a psychological horror game. It's not one that really will creep you out big time, and take that from me as someone who is a pretty easy target for scares in video games. Silent Hill does a really good job of unsettling you in completely different ways. As I described in my Silent Hill 3 retrospective, that's one of the most violent games I've ever played, but not in the Dead Space level violence. It's the way violence is depicted through the game's themes, its environment, its music, the way encounters occur. It is brilliant. Whereas Silent Hill 2 is one of the scariest games because of the themes it dives into across its many characters, suicide, depression, and the list goes on. And it gets very real with those subjects. At the heart of this story is James Sunderland, and he is a character like many in the Silent Hill series who's just a dude, really. Like, it's not one of these heroic characters, you know, your Leon S. Kennedy, for example, who is capable and a cop. James is just another guy on this planet, frankly, and it's one of the things I really love about this series. Is similar to how I love Dead Space, because Isaac Clarke is just like an engineer, and he has to figure things out as time goes on and become a hero that he never thought he had to be. Same thing here, except you're being the hero of your own story in the case of Silent Hill, because usually you're there because you're getting over something pretty traumatic, and boy, does what this story dive into, it gets super serious. Obviously, I'm going to avoid spoilers, but if you do want a full spoilery deep dive, we do have our full Silent Hill 2 retrospective of my first time through the game, and it's almost an hour long because I had just so much to say on the game after I walked away from it. But as I mentioned, Silent Hill 2 isn't super scary. I think the opening apartment section of the game really got me a bit worried, and then after that segment, I was all right. Now, no guarantees with the remake, with the new camera angle, with how combat's handled, with how exploration can be handled. Things are going to be different. It doesn't seem to be a one-to-one remake in any sense. It does have a lot of similarities, though, which I think is good. So long as the story remains untouched, that's all I primarily care about, as we'll talk about the gameplay in a little bit. It's the same kind of rule of thumb I had for Knights of the Old Republic, where that's my favorite game of all time. And if you're going to go ahead and remake that, okay, you got my seal of approval. You can change the gameplay, you can change exploration, just don't touch that main story. Got it? Good. Same thing here with Silent Hill 2 Remake, which so far previews have suggested that's not the case. But yeah, if you're in it for a story that could be potentially life-altering, yes, it really is that good in my opinion, then Silent Hill 2 should absolutely be on your radar. Whether it's the original or the remake. We'll see when reviews shake up. But really, Silent Hill 2 is that good in the story department. It's really why people fell in love with it in the first place. Its characters, its themes, the way you'll meet certain characters, and when you depart from them, there's a level of ambiguity that begs you to think afterward where they went and what was actually happening to them, and was it even real? Just so many questions are left after you finish these games. Again, it's a series that I define as art. It begs you to think deeper on everything you see in the game. Not everything is just there to look cool or be creepy. There's always multiple layers. It's the Onion series, I call it. Just you peel back all these layers and there's always something beneath it. So on a storytelling level, on a character level, I feel like from my experience thus far across Silent Hill 2 and 3 and now a little bit of 1, Silent Hill is at its most brilliant with Silent Hill 2. That's also because of the phenomenal soundtrack. I mean, for such a creepy game, it is such a vibe at the same time, which is why I think it earned a lot of its cult classic standing, because it just is a game that you'll listen to the music outside of the game and be like nodding your head. Like, it's so good. And it's so funny because its inability to kind of fit, I feel, with the game is what gives it a lot of charm. Like when you see the opening sequence that's playing behind me on the CRT, there's a bop that's going on while this is all happening. And it's all depicting this like emotional trauma that you're gonna go through in this game. But it's such a vibe that I'm like, why am I nodding my head to James going through some really tough stuff? And on that note, just to close out the story talks, I'll say that James' character, for me and my experience as a first timer, went in directions I just never would have expected. So yeah, on a story level, you're in for a treat if you've never played Silent Hill 2 and you've waited out because of the gameplay for a remake. Let's hope it really delivers on that front. Because yeah, gameplay is where things get a little touchy. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video, how yeah, you definitely want to play this. It really is that good for particular people. I'm sure anyone who's ever watched Silent Hill 2 has gone like, yeah, that's an awesome story. I love that, to varying degrees, potentially. Whereas the gameplay is what's been a barrier for a lot of people. It is the tank controls. Even if you're using like a D-pad compared to the analog stick, it's still really tough to navigate because of the set camera angles and sometimes inverting your controls where you're walking up and then the camera switches and now you're walking down when you want to keep walking up, or then you have to hold down to go up now. It's something like that. It can get really confusing to just navigate the environment. Again, for many people, myself included by the way, the movement in the game, I feel, is part of the experience. And I know that sounds like I'm coping, but I hope you understand as someone who's just been a fan for a very short period of time, it's just my genuine thoughts on the matter, which is that I feel like Silent Hill is a lot about being lost and trying to find your way. And that sort of sense of being lost and not really having ease of access to anything, I think puts you in the shoes of the characters a little bit more. You feel that same panic and confusion they do. And for some people, they'll be like, dude, I still will get the experience even with better controls. Stop it, Maddie. And to that I say, fair play. You're probably right. But for me, I am a defender of the controls. At first, I was like, I don't know. But after Silent Hill 2 and 3, I'm like, yeah, they're not my favorite. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's good. But when I think about it in line with the story and what the characters are going through, it feels too fitting to ignore for me. That's not to say that if Silent Hill 2 Remake plays like a normal third-person shooter, I'm going to sit here and lose my mind over it, which I've seen some people do. I'm not in that camp. I'm just saying that for the original, it was not a barrier of entry to me. It was actually more of an enhancement once I adjusted to it. And you can see that where I complained a bit about it in Silent Hill 2, and then I played 3, and I was like, I get it now, because you know what to expect, and you see how it kind of aids the experience and the stress that you experience alongside the main character when combat picks up. Which, speaking of which, yeah, you're playing as a normal dude, so things like shooting, melee attacks, you're not built to just wipe through enemies. In fact, sometimes you just want to outright run by them. I will say in Silent Hill 2 compared to 3, I felt more incentivized to fight back, whereas Silent Hill 3, there was just sometimes so many enemies, so much back and forth, so many respawning that, yeah, you don't want to fight, especially in the other world. At least in Silent Hill 3 until you get the submachine gun, the katana, then I'm more than willing to throw hands in that game. But Silent Hill 2, I really did find myself incentivized to fight a little bit more, but you're just going to be swinging like a lead pipe and beating enemies over the head multiple times, hitting them while they're down, making sure they're dead, and you don't hit multiple enemies at once, and it's very slow and clunky. It's human. It makes sense. Like if you were there, you would probably be in a similar situation, but because it's a video game, it doesn't feel particularly fun in that aspect. Aiming the gun is also tough, especially with the inverted camera angle. It looks really good in those shots. Like, it's very screenshot friendly, but doesn't feel particularly great. Again, to me, aids a little bit of the storytelling and the themes, but definitely if you're looking at fun factor, not the greatest. That's been the biggest barrier to entry, whereas the original, it's problematic. And Remake, it seems like they've got it right, where you just have the over-the-shoulder third-person shooting, and it looks like they got some of the melee down a lot better than what was originally first shown off. So again, holding my breath here a little bit, but yeah, the gameplay is definitely the toughest part to get into for Silent Hill, but I'm hoping the remake starts the end of that for a lot of people, because what they're missing out on is one of the most special stories in all of video games. There is also the puzzles. Silent Hill has always been a very puzzle-focused part of the experience, and I will say this, I am not a defender of the puzzles. Each solution is randomized, so we'll all get the same puzzle, but let's say you get stuck and you just want to say, screw it, I'm gonna bulldoze through this thing and look up a walkthrough. You can't. It's just like, here's a solution pattern potentially on how we got it, but each answer is a little bit different, so it always incentivizes you to figure it out yourself. There is that level of satisfaction of, I got it. But still, I think removing the whole walkthrough aspect from it, I do think some of these puzzles kind of exist just to pad things out a little bit. And by the way, even if you use a walkthrough, sometimes these puzzles take time because you have to go back and get very particular objects from particular rooms, and enemies will respawn, and that's where the frustration can set in a little bit. So I'm wondering how the remake maybe streamlines some of the puzzle elements there, if at all, because if there's anything I don't want one-to-one in the remake, it would actually be the puzzles personally. But I am also a puzzle simpleton, unlike I think many in the audience out there, where I say you make a puzzle good enough where you have to think for a little bit, but not a total brain buster, especially in a game like Silent Hill 2 where it's so story driven. You don't want to disrupt that story ever unless the player chooses to. And one way they could choose to is to explore Silent Hill itself, which is one thing I'm very excited about with the remake. If they choose to open things up a little bit, apparently buildings like the apartments in Silent Hill 2 that you open up with are actually much more explorable. New rooms, new hallways, that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that carries into actually Silent Hill itself, where you can go into different houses and find equipment. There's more resource gathering apparently in this game. It seems like Silent Hill 2 is going to become much more of a survival horror game. I like that it's not totally one-to-one, only because then it can't erase the Silent Hill that I love in Silent Hill 2. That will always be there for me. I do hope they modernize that, like maybe in like a new HD collection that's not like the PS3 one, which I think some people oversell how bad it is, but I do think the visuals are a really important part of Silent Hill, and you lose a lot of that plus some more that people will care about with these HD collections. But I think modernizing those would be pretty good for Konami to do, so you have the ability to sit alongside the Silent Hill 2 remake. I think the same thing again with one of my favorites in KOTOR, where they ported KOTOR forward, so I went, okay, it's on modern hardware, great, go ahead and remake it, because if you screw it up, at least I have access to the game that means the most to me, the version that means the most to me. So we'll see what other changes they bring, but I do hope it continues to be more explorable, and I can spend more time with this game, because that's one thing is I love the world and the music and the characters in Silent Hill, and I would love to spend more time with them. Part of my adoration for this series is also that the time you spend with them is a little bit limited, especially in a game like Silent Hill 3, where it felt super long, but it was really like 8 or 9 hours long for me once I finished everything up. But it felt so long because of the themes of the game being so well realized, how violent it was, how oppressed I was by my enemies constantly. So maybe a longer game doesn't really work out when you balance it that way. But for me right now in my headspace, Silent Hill 2 and its characters, I can't get enough of. I would love to interact with them some more, and just, yeah, if you are looking at Silent Hill 2, you should really play it. It really is that good. As someone who's a new fan to the series, I definitely am happy I waited a long time to play it, because I think if I played this when I was younger, number one, it would scare the hell out of me. Number two, I would have got confused. Number three, puzzles would have absolutely filtered me. And number four, the gameplay would have as well. So I do think it's a series that if you're a little bit older, like pushing, mid-20s, early 30s, like you're in that range and you've been gaming for a while, I think Silent Hill is something you'll definitely appreciate. But I do think the barrier to entry will lower with Silent Hill 2 Remake, which I cannot wait for. One of my most anticipated games. So we'll see how Bloober Team does. But ladies and gentlemen, fingers crossed, it's absolutely brilliant. those are my thoughts on Silent Hill 2 for those of you who are getting ready for launch. Let me know what you're thinking of this game down below. Other than that, I will catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.